Content warning. The Matherson Marriage contains unhealthy relationship dynamics and fictional domestic abuse. If you are in a real-life Matherson marriage, please reach out to the appropriate authorities for help. Resources you may find helpful include the Pixel Project's Domestic Violence Resource page and UN Women's International Helplines list. Resources will be linked in the video description for accessibility. Huge content warning for Chapter 3. This chapter includes cruelty to animals, the murdering of innocent puppies, domestic violence, period-typical toxic masculinity, and it includes a slur against mixed race people in reference to dogs. I really advise caution with this chapter. Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I will be reading Chapter 3 of The Matherson Marriage by Ruby M. Ayres. Chapter 3. Pansy went into her own room and locked the door. Then, for no reason at all, she began to cry. It was quite dark, save for faint starlight that shed a pale glimmer through the trees, and the warm night air was full of the perfume of dew-washed flowers. She stood at the window for a long time, lost in thought, and presently, far away along the winding road, she saw the gleam of headlights, and knew that the car was returning. So Lynn Ramsden had gone. She was unutterably relieved, and yet what reason had she to fear him? He had treated her casually enough, and it was quite evident, as she had told Joyce, that he had forgotten his old infatuation. She knew she ought to be glad. Of course she was glad. She would hate to feel that any man had been unhappy all these years for her sake. She got up early and went along to her husband's room, but he had already dressed, and one of the servants told her he had gone out. Buster came tearing along the corridor. "Dodie, come out with me! There's new puppies!" was his excited greeting. "3 of them, all black ones." He dragged her down the stairs and out into the garden. "Father says they've got to be drowned!" he rushed on with breathless indignation. "But you won't let him, will you, Dodie, darling? They're such teeny little puppies. They won't eat hardly anything." Pansy was afraid to promise. "We'll see," was all she dared say as they crossed the yard towards the stables. Buster let her go and ran on ahead, disappearing into the open door, his curls shining in the morning sunlight. The next moment Pansy heard a wail of despair and her husband's angry voice. "Don't be such a baby. It's only babies who cry and make such a fuss. It's time you went to a boarding school, young man, and began to grow up." Pansy broke into a run. She reached the stable door and stopped with a swift exclamation of pain. Buster was on his knees, sobbing and wailing over the soft, limp bodies of 3 tiny puppies. "They were such little ones," Buster wailed broken-heartedly, "and I wanted to play with them." He scrambled to his feet suddenly and turned on his father like a young fury. Hate you, he panted. "You drowned them! Hate you! He beat his father with tiny, passionate fists, and Basil caught them both in one hand, holding them fast. "You young devil," he said, half in anger, half amusement. "Stop crying this minute, or I'll give you something to cry for." Pansy flew to Buster's rescue. "Let him go, Basil, please," she begged. "And I think you might have kept one of the puppies. You know Buster wanted one." "Pooh, they're only mongrels," Matherson said contemptuously. "You make a perfect fool of the boy." He shook Buster none too gently. But Buster had quite lost control of himself. Bereft of the use of both his hands, he started kicking with all his might. Hate you! He screamed. Buster, Pansy implored. She saw the rising anger in her husband's face. She tried to drag the boy away from him, but she was too late. Basil looked at his hand and gave Buster a sound box on the ears. "You brute!" Pansy snatched Buster into her arms. She was almost beside herself. Basil had never struck the boy before. "You brute!" she panted again. "What has happened to you? If you go on like this, you'll make me hate you too." And then she stopped with a gasp of dismay, as there was a step on the cobbled yard outside, and Lynn Ramsden stood in the doorway. There was an uncomfortable silence. Then Matherson laughed. "Just in time to witness a little domestic scene, Ramsden," he said. "This is married bliss, being informed by both your wife and son that they hate the sight of you." He walked away. Pansy stood with Buster clasped to her breast, her eyes hot and ashamed. She tried to laugh. It's all so silly," she said breathlessly. "Basil had the puppies drowned, and it upset Buster." She kissed the curly head buried on her shoulder. I'm afraid he was rather naughty," she apologized. But he loves animals, and it almost broke his heart. She kissed him again. Never mind, darling. Dodie will buy you another puppy, a much prettier one. Don't want prettier one. I want those, Buster wailed. Ramsden held out his arms. Let me carry him, Pansy. He's too heavy for you. He took the boy from her and carried him out into the sunshine. Don't cry, old chap, he said kindly. Men don't cry. Buster fought hard for composure. Don't want to be a man if my father's a man, he said rebelliously. That's all nonsense, Ramsden said calmly. He put the boy down and turned to Pansy. I thought you went away last night, she said constrainedly. He laughed. I tried to, but I waited about for you to come and say good night to me, and lost the last train to town. So I came back, and Matherson very kindly put me up. Pansy looked away. I didn't know, she said, and he answered warmly. I hope you do not object. Why should I? I am sorry if you lost the train through my fault. There was a little silence. Then Pansy said nervously, I am sorry you overheard that scene just now. I don't often lose my temper. I don't really, but if anyone hurts Buster, it seems more than I can bear. Oh, I think I would kill anyone who really hurt him. You love him very much. The color deepened in her cheeks. Love him? I think I just worship him. A grim little smile crossed Ramsden's face. Matherson was right then, at dinner last night, when he said that with you, it was always all or nothing. What do you mean? I was thinking of your affections. You either give everything or nothing. And isn't that the best way? She asked defensively. He shrugged his shoulders. I'm hardly the right one to judge, do you think? For a moment she did not answer. Then she said nervously, Lynn, what happened in the past is not going to prevent us being friends, is it? Ramsden smiled. You're not trying to flatter me into the belief that you want me for a friend, Mrs. Matherson. Her eyes grew distressed. Why not? Old friends are better than new, don't you think? I do, and Basil likes you. He said so only last night. He asked me to be nice to you. Ramsden laughed outright, and she looked up at him offendedly. Why are you laughing? I begged your pardon. I hardly know. It struck me as being rather quaint, that's all. Pansy caught her breath. That's unkind. Unkind? Don't you rather exaggerate, Mrs. Matherson? She raised her head haughtily. I suppose I'm foolish to trouble myself at all. It was only because Basil wished it. I'm sorry I said anything. Oh, don't be sorry, he said easily. I hope we shall be good friends. It would be decidedly awkward to be on bad terms with one's nearest neighbors, wouldn't it? She did not answer. She would have given anything not to have made that allusion to the past, a past which she knew now that if he had been not completely forgotten, he only remembered with amusement. She hastened her steps. Ramsden followed silently, and as they neared the house, he asked, What does Buster call you? I could not quite catch it. She looked up, her momentary anger forgotten. He calls me Dodie, she explained, flushing. When he was very tiny, he tried to say darling, and couldn't quite manage it, and it got to something like Dodie, and it's been Dodie ever since. Her face hardened. Basil hates it, of course, she said defiantly. She had not yet forgiven Basil for striking Buster. She went on ahead and joined Joyce in the hall. Joyce looked past her to Ramsden. Why, I thought he'd gone, she said. No, he lost the train last night and had to come back. Pansy avoided looking at her friend. And is it true he has bought Chiswell's and is going to live there? Joyce asked. Yes, I believe it is. He can't be very poor then, Joyce said in her blunt way. I thought you said he was. Pansy laughed rather bitterly. He's a great many things now. He wasn't when I knew him 6 years ago, she answered. Thank you for listening to Chapter 3, and I hope that you enjoyed it despite the really awful stuff that it contained. I hope you have a great day. Bye!